за Маріуполь всіх. Під 0. Множимо на 0.
Продовжую рухатися з українськими військовими у бік центру села, де вже виявили російських військових і зав'язався бій. Чуєте, стріляють.
Продовжуйте наступ, закріпляйтеся на блокпосту. Ще раз повтори, два останні.
Белый.
Создай плотный огонь.
Yesterday, the world did nothing. I'm sorry, but it's true. If you are united against the Nazism and this terror, you have to close.
A leader at breaking point in a war that's hit a new low.
And once again, Chris Reason is live for us in Kyiv. Chris, there are now fears Russia is planning to use biological weapons.
Yeah, good evening to you, Mark. That's right. Russian officials have publicly announced that they claim that the Ukrainians are making chemical weapons themselves. Now, US intelligence and the White House hit straight back at that, saying the claim is false, preposterous, and more than likely a ruse, an excuse for Russia to go down that path themselves and potentially use biological or chemical weapons here in Ukraine. They fear that after having bombed a maternity hospital, there is no new low that Russia won't sink to in order to win this war. Mark?
Chris Reason in the Ukrainian capital. Thank you.
Returning to our top story now, day 14 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the British PM calling the latest attacks depraved. Jeff Parry joins us now live from Lviv. Jeff, we've seen some terrible pictures from the war in Ukraine, but the scenes of an attack on a children's and maternity hospital are simply shocking.
They are, and the war entering its third week, and what we're seeing now is, as you described a little bit earlier, a new low. The Russians say that they do not fire at civilian targets, but it's pretty hard to explain this away. A massive bomb dropped in the forecourt of a maternity and children's hospital in Mariupol. The damage there for everyone to see. The whole complex destroyed inside, just twisted medical equipment. Most of the people were probably in the basement at the time because they take shelter during the day. 17 people we understand to be the initial injury toll, including pregnant women about to go into labour. Distressing scenes as we see them covered in blood being stretchered out of the ruins there. But there is a belief that there are children and expectant mothers and staff trapped under the rubble there, and rescuers are desperately trying to save them. Of course, this is in the city of Mariupol, which has put up with so much in the last 2 weeks, and now they have to contend with this. The President Zelensky described this moment as an atrocity, and he said, "How much longer will the world be an accomplice to ignoring terror?"
And the President also continues his call, Jeff, for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, warning millions of lives could be lost.
Yes, indeed, and this is a constant refrain from the Ukrainian president. He says, if you can secure the skies for us, and he's talking to NATO, then we can take care of what's happening on the land. He's been constantly rebuffed, though. NATO worried that for them to put jets to secure the air above Ukraine would put them in direct conflict with Russian aircraft, and therefore lead to the start of World War III. Some people say, of course, that World War III has already begun, but President Zelensky still keen for a no-fly zone, or the provision of the Polish jets. That's also stalled. Anne?
Can you update us, Jeff, on the situation in Chernobyl, where electricity has been cut to some parts of the reactor?
Yes, this is a growing concern. Of course, this is the nuclear power station where part of it blew up in 1986. It's still an operating nuclear power plant. They require electricity from outside the plant to keep the fuel rods stable. They do that by covering it with water. If they can't get electricity, the fear is that the water will drain away, and that's a very dangerous situation. The fear is that that could lead to possible radiation leaks in the future. Anne?
Jeff, you're based there in Lviv in western Ukraine. There have been no direct attacks in that region, but locals must nevertheless be terrified as millions of people flee across the border.
Yes, well, it's become a hub for all those people who are coming from the east, from the conflict in places like Kharkiv and Kiev and Mariupol, if they can get out. Hundreds of thousands of people have flocked to this city, preparatory to leaving for neighbouring countries like Poland and Romania and Hungary. But they're also turn its eyes west once it's dealt with places like the east of the country and the central part of the country, because Lviv is considered the possible alternative capital if the east falls to the Russians, and that what's left.
Tensions are rising over the conflict in eastern Ukraine after a massive Russian military build-up near its border with the region. More than 100,000 Russian troops have been strategically placed close to the border they share with Ukraine, and many experts are seriously worried. So, are we on the brink of a new war?
We're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack on Ukraine. I would say that's more stark than we have been.
To understand what's going on, we're going to explain the Russia-Ukraine conflict and how it's led to what's happening today. First, let's look at how Russia and Ukraine are linked. Their history goes back as far as the 9th century, when a group of people called the Rus moved their capital to Kiev. During the 10th and 11th centuries, it became the largest and most powerful state in Europe. It laid the foundation for the national identity of Ukrainians and Russians. So what would become Russian culture began in Kiev before moving east to Moscow. Ukraine would become part of the Russian Empire for centuries and would also be part of the USSR. Putin is obsessed by Russia and Ukraine's long pre-1991 history as one country. In July 2021, Putin released an epic 7,000-word essay about their shared history, in which he said, quote, "I am confident that true sovereignty of Ukraine is possible only in partnership with Russia, for we are one people." The thing is, most Ukrainians don't agree with that version of history. Also fueling Putin's obsession with Ukraine is the events of 1991. Putin, as a young KGB intelligence officer, watched the Berlin Wall crumble, his beloved Soviet Union collapse. Since then, he's been on a mission to return Russia to what he believes is its rightful place on the world stage. The fall of communism at the end of the Cold War saw the former Soviet states turn westward, ditching their Russian rulers and turning to Europe's west and the US to create new economic, political and cultural futures. In 1991, Ukraine gained its independence from the Soviet Union. For 31 years, Ukraine has had its own sovereignty and been an independent country. But that independence Putin is driven by a sense of righting what he sees as history's wrongs. He wants to reverse what he views as the humiliating breakup of the Soviet Union more than 30 years ago. But also at the heart of this conflict is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. NATO was founded in 1949 after World War II to protect against Soviet aggression. The treaty states that if one nation is invaded or attacked by a third party, all nations in NATO will collectively mobilise in its defence. The alliance has since expanded to 30 countries, including a number of former USSR states. The Kremlin is furious at those former Soviet states joining the treaty, seeing NATO's presence on Russia's border as a threat. Now, Putin has demanded guarantees from NATO that Ukraine and Georgia, another former Soviet republic that Russia briefly invaded in 2008, never be allowed to join the alliance. But NATO allies say Putin cannot deny Ukraine or any country that right. Ukraine has long fought to join NATO and is still working on making that goal a reality. To say Putin hates NATO would be an understatement. April 2008 was the last time Putin attended a NATO meeting. The Russian president said then that allowing Ukraine to join NATO would be a direct threat to Russian security. He told the US and German leaders, quote, "For me, Ukraine is not a real country." Now, Russia claims that in the early 90s, at the end of the Cold War, the US pledged that they would not let NATO expand eastward. But that claim has been debunked, including by the former Russian President Gorbachev. The topic was never discussed. Now, those arguments are completely ignored by Vladimir Putin. So they're the historical ties between Russia and Ukraine. In the next video, we'll explain how and why the conflict started in 2013 and whether it might lead to an all-out war.